let's just start it off with a bang. We all love the dollars out there. I can even see it there. We all love the monies. But you know what? Look at this money. Look how quickly and easily it burns. Wow! Set my house on fire. Funny money. Let's get into it right here. Let me go ahead and share the right screen. And here we go. Funny money. So what I've done is at certain presentations is I brought cowrie shells before. I've handed out cowrie shells, and those are little shells that were found on beaches in different places, and they use those as money. And it's really difficult to make it rain with those because it's more like making it hail, and I can't even imagine utilizing them. So I'm going to go in and talk about the history of this. I'm going to talk about how money has been used around the world. Talk about the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank and the situation that we're in a little bit, and then we're going to conclude it at where we are with cryptocurrency. So let us begin. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Hold on here. Let's go back some slides. So when we think of money, traditionally, we might think of this, right? We can see a Scrooge McDuck, but here's the, what's more accurate maybe is Peter, they're going, hey, Meg, shut up, Meg, and give me a Kleenex. I broke my back here, Meg. But, and then also one of my favorite moments from Breaking Bad, I love this one right here, and they're hanging out there on this big, huge, fat stack of cash that was courteous of Mr. Walter White in his entrepreneurial ventures. Maybe you might think of Wall Street. A lot of people think of money, they think of Wall Street. That's where a lot of capitalism happens. And Occupy Wall Street was a thing there that was such a big movement in our time, right around when that economic collapse thing happened in 2008, 2009, and we had this thing. I mean, people were just camping outside there at Wall Street. I mean, it was such a powerful movement, and people who were just not pleased with how the monetary system is going. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of money. And so, we started out with bartering, and even before that, there was like shells, and there was probably bartering even way before that. So bartering's been around forever. There were some shells, gold. We turned into metal coins, paper money, plastic cards, checks in there, right? Electronic money, and then cryptocurrency is the sort of the path that we're on. So let's go way back into to a little island in Micronesia called Yap. And on that island, what they did was they would get in their little boats made of bamboo and sail all around. And they found this island several hundred miles away from them. And this is, a long, long time ago. And what they would do is they found this island had all this limestone on it, and they would carve them into wheels, place them in their boat, and then sail back. And they used these as money. And it's really interesting to sort of think about how they would use it as money. But these things were so heavy that they didn't actually exchange hands. They weren't actually moved. It was just like, okay, we know that one right there, that's Joel's, right? And so that was like a really early instance of using money. And those yapstones are still there in some cases, and they have not moved in thousands years plus. Papua New Guinea, they have these cowrie shells. And I have a whole bunch of these cowrie shells. You can actually go on Amazon or eBay and buy like a 10-pound bag of these cowrie shells for like $10 or something. And then if you ever invent a time machine, take those with you back there to Papua New Guinea, you are going to be king. They're going to be like, welcome to the kingdom. Look at all these cowrie shells that Travis brought with him in his shiny DeLorean. So used as money. So they would just walk around. They would have this on a cane. And if they needed to buy something or make it rain, they would just peel off a few and be like, pow, making it rain. Now they were also sort of used in China. But those cowrie shells, they're very fragile. Like they can break pretty easily. And so what they decided to do was, hey, let's make cowrie shells from these ox bones. And I'm going to put these little lines in here for some reason. I don't know what those lines mean, but they had two sides and there was holes on those sides, and they would just string those up like on a necklace or whatever, and they would carry around their money with them. So it was very interesting. Now this story right here, this happens today. Parmesan cheese as currency, okay? Now this is serious. Let's take a look. Credito Emiliano in Italiano. They accept the Parmigiano cheese for the investment, the collateral. No joke. These large cheese wheels, they have a serial number. They hold them up to 34 months. They're valued at about $340 for each wheel. And the bank vault holds about 17,000 tons of cheese. And here it is. Boom. Literally, each one of those is worth $340. And that's loan collateral in Italy. And it has been for who knows how long. It's just a really interesting thing to think about how that all works. Now, we think of money, too. We think of these ancient gold coins from all over the world. I've actually collected coins from different places and money from all over because it's really interesting to see how money has evolved. And I took this right straight off of the Googles because look at how intricate these coins are. Like the artwork on these coins in ancient Greece are just spectacular. I couldn't just choose one. I was like, look at them. They're just also amazing. Different coins used from gold, silver, bronze, different kinds of coins, probably copper. Really, really interesting. And we're talking long time ago here. And then the Roman coinage. You can tell a lot of these coins here have been in circulation for a long time. They're so worn. But it's interesting to think about how they finally said, hey, let's use money. And what's always happened is, the king or the emperor or whoever's in charge, they have power to make coinage. They normally put their face on it, right? This is money from my kingdom. This is money from my jurisdiction. And over time, these coins could be just dispersed all over the world as these trade routes grew over time. You had the ancient Silk Road, and then you had, different other travelers traveling around the world and doing stuff. So it's really interesting to look at this really old school money. And, the sort of the timeline of how money has evolved. You have some of the ancient Roman coins, which lasted for about 3 centuries there actually about 5 centuries there because it's BCE, which is the old sort of BC, but now it means before Common Era. They changed it. Remember when it was BC and AD? Well, now it's BCE, which is before Common Era, and then CE, which is Common Era. So for 500 years or so, that was that coin. For about 800 years, the Byzantium Empire there, they had their coins. And then from Florence, which was interesting during the Renaissance time when all those artists were there, like Da Vinci and all those guys were creating all the great artwork. The golden from the Netherlands. You have the Spanish real, the pieces of 8 you probably heard of, the British pound, and then the US dollar is where we are now. And that really ties into the world reserve currency. So right now, the world reserve currency is the US dollar. Now, why that's important is if you are a country and you want to buy oil, you must first buy dollars and use those dollars to buy oil. The world reserve currency is the dollar. You cannot buy oil without buying dollars and using dollars, which is why countries all over the world want dollars, right? Now, this is interesting. Dating back to like the mid-1400s, the Portuguese currency was the world reserve currency at that particular time. Not that they were buying oil, right? That was not necessary at that time, but it just shows the Spanish real, that was about 110 years was the world reserve currency, then the Dutch, then the French franc, and then the British pound. Notice the average reserve currency lifespan is 94 years, and the US dollar has been the world reserve currency for nearly 100. What that tells me is it's near the end of life cycle for the dollar based on history, right? So let's go back in time a little bit and talk about bartering, because this is interesting to me. So say, for example, in Ireland in the first millennium, before the Vikings showed up, Irish people, they like to trade their goods via barter, and each animal had its own value. So for example, one sheep is worth 6 chickens, which is cool. And a sheep is also worth 3 bushels of wheat, meaning 2 chickens are worth a bushel of wheat because math, right? We divide that down. But now check this out. There's some additional rules you got to know. Now, a fully grown 2-year-old pig is equal to 1 sheep. So sheep equals pig, right? But if you want to get a calf, because those are more valuable than sheep or pigs, one calf, baby cow, is worth 2 sheep or a pig and a sheep, right? So you got the math going down here. You can mix and match the change however you like. You could have a bunch of wheat and some chickens, and you could pay for that as well. And an adult cow that gives milk, that's worth 8 sheep, okay? So a cow that gives milk, very valuable. You can use that milk, but just think of how many chickens you could have, right? So here you go, math time, folks. How many chickens can I get for all of this? I'm not telling you the answer. You're going to figure it out. 1 milk-giving cow, 1 calf, 1 pig, 1 sheep, and 3 bushels of wheat equals how many chickens? A lot of chickens. And then the Vikings arrived. And Vikings, you know, they're not so big on barter. They're like, I will take your stuff, and I will take your women, and we're going to take your sheep and your wheat and your gold, and we're going to kill everybody else. And then the strong ones that remain, you're coming with us. You're going to be slaves. We're taking you over here. We're going to sell you. Vikings, very brutal, very brutal. But they did like to trade, and they did travel all over the world. Look at the Vikings. They traded right across the known world at the time, including Greenland, Iceland. Very interesting. They actually named Iceland because it's green and it's habitable and it's very nice. And they named Greenland because it's horrible and it's full of ice and it's uninhabitable. And I think it's the greatest troll of humanity potentially was Iceland and Greenland. So they changed the names on purpose to confuse folks. But you can see the Vikings, they traveled all over and they traded and they took their gold and their silver and they made their little brooches and their bracelets. And the Vikings always had a little, once they reach a certain age, they get a big Viking bracelet, and it's interesting. And they found some coins from all the way from Baghdad in Ireland where they had done some trading. So that was interesting. And what the Vikings would do is they would melt silver into these little bars called ingots, and they would have these little scales, and they would weigh them, and they would see them, make sure that it was a fair amount that they were paying for things. So pretty innovative use of coinage and metals back in the Viking age. And you know, we'll advance a little further down time. You have the Knights Templar. This was what their currency looked like, and over time they became some of the wealthiest people on earth. And in some cases, they believe there might even be Templar treasure located in certain places around the world still. They think that in Oak Island in Canada, there's this island called Oak Island, and there's been this mystery about this money and this treasure there that it's actually a TV show on History Channel about it, which is pretty interesting. Medieval money, here's what that looked like. Pretty interesting to see this old coinage. And here's the Spanish real, the pieces of 8 that they had. Pirate treasure, imagine in the 16s and 1700s, and you're a swashbuckler, and all you're trying to do is get some booty, pirate booty, which is treasure. So let's begin to talk about a little bit about modern banking. So you can see they were using coins, and kings and kingdoms would create their coinage. Well, what would happen is what started happening in Venice and in Italy was they had these goldsmiths, and what they would do is they were storing coinage and gold bars and whatnot, and they would have these paper receipts that they would give to the owner of that gold that's in their vault. And what they started to notice was people were trading around the paper receipts, and they were keeping the gold in the vault. And so there was never really run on the vault. The gold just stayed in the vaults, and then they were trading these papers. And that just sort of evolved over time throughout Europe, where, you know, even in England, finally in the 1600s, Goldsmith, they introduced paper receipts there, and they could be used to purchase goods. But the gold stayed in the vault. And so what happened was, well, here's actually one of the oldest banker receipts, I believe, from I don't remember exactly where. Maybe that's from Italy, but really old receipts. And so they would trade these back and forth. And then somebody thought, wow, well, if the gold is going to stay in the vault, what if we create more of these receipts and get these traded around, and then we can just, we got enough gold, and then they're not picking up the gold. We can just use this paper. And, born was basically fractional reserve banking. Now, fractional reserve banking exists today. Now, if I were to deposit $1,000 into my bank can now loan that $1,000 out 9 times. So essentially, my $1,000 deposit becomes $10,000 to the bank. So the fractional reserve system is a system in which only a fraction of the bank deposits are backed by actual cash and available for withdrawal. That's why when you had the Great Depression and stuff and you had these bank runs, well, the banks didn't have enough money in the banks because of fractional reserve banking. They only had to keep 10% of that money in the bank, right? And so if everybody, 100% of people come to try to get their money, there's not enough. It's crazy. Now here's a little rabbit hole for you guys to go down to really understand the history of money. The Rothschild banking dynasty is very, very influential throughout history. And Mayer Amschel Rothschild is the head of the Rothschild family back in the 1700s. And he was working with some pretty influential people. Wilhelm was one of the guys who became Wilhelm II, I think. But what ended up happening was he was a goldsmith working with all these influential people. And he had all this money, some of which were to pay soldiers. And he kind of embezzled a lot of money at the time, nearly $3 million, and then set up these banks all throughout Europe. And he had his 5 sons expand that family banking empire. Then basically what's happened over time since then is one bank will fund one side of a war, another bank will fund another side of the war. They sort of determine who they want to win that war, and then they can delay or they can give additional money or, oh, the weapons didn't show up. But then what happens after the war is over? Well, you got to rebuild the country, and now you got to pay the bankers back plus interest. And so war is very profitable for bankers. They really, really, really like it. This is a major, major rabbit hole to go down and do your own research on. I'm not too conspiratorial. This is common knowledge if you dive down the right rabbit holes. Pretty interesting stuff. And he also said this quote right here: "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." Now, that right there is very prescient information, because banking, central banking, has been built on this principle at this. Who really controls things now? The bankers, the people who print the money. Look at them. They're printing the money. Is printer go brr. It's one of the most amazing things once you realize this, and you realize money is not what you think it is, and you go, wow, there's some very powerful people in control of this stuff. So let's look at it, kind of the history of modern banking here. We're going back. We got colonial times, experimenting with central banking, free banking era, banking panics, and then the creation of the Federal Reserve then ended up occurring. So colonial money. I actually have some colonial money right here. I can make it rain. So, oh, pay to the altar, 18 pence. This bill is 1 shilling and 6 pence. Proclamation is emitted by a law of the colony of New Jersey, passed in the 14th year of the reign of His Majesty King George III, dated March 25th, 1776, 18 pence, right? There's some other ones here. I got a lot. I got these duplicates at a place one time. Pretty cool. So that's colonial money. Then in the 1800s, this is some of the United States money right here. Notice in the 1800s, individual banks printed their own money. Like right now, here it is. Here's the bank. Here's the Bank of Florida. You can see that Bank of Florida, $4 right here. Bank of Florida, $4. They had gold in their vaults, and they printed money based on the gold that's in their vaults, plus fractional reserve banking. So if they had 1,000 pounds of gold, then they would loan out 10,000 pounds, right, or whatever. So it's interesting how these states would do this. And here's some Confederate States of America money, $1,000 paid by the Bank of Montgomery. And here's the register, and here's the treasurer, and you come here and you can get your money. Interesting. Then after the Civil War, there became a time when most every country in the world was using the gold standard. Now, might not have been a perfect standard, but it was interesting on how the value of money was easily tradable, connected to people. I think, well, I have another slide in here I need to throw in. But basically, it was really easy to control inflation, to control deflation and pricing. And I'm not saying that the gold standard is the best way to do it, but maybe a gold crypto standard down the road might not be a bad idea. And when economies crash, typically throughout history, the governments and the countries that have the most gold are the ones that are able to recover the fastest. So even though we're in this fiat currency stage, the countries that have a lot of gold are going to be the winners down the road. And what banks would do is, here's your gold certificate. You have $20 worth of gold. Boom, here it is. And you could get your gold coin worth $20. Pretty cool. And then we evolved to pay personal checks. Like, have you ever been at a grocery store behind grandma and she's writing a check and it's the year 2020? And you're like, what? Come on, grandma. Here, and look at this. Here are these early credit cards. So credit cards are essentially paying for something with money you don't have, with money that doesn't exist until you first use it. And then you pay interest on money that didn't exist until you used it. Like, you literally create money out of thin air, and it's really amazing. So the Federal Reserve Bank, 1913 was when it went into law. However, it was really, there was a group, there's a great book by the legendary G. Edward Griffin called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And he's going to be speaking tomorrow, and he's going to go in and talk a lot about this. I think if you want to learn about how the Federal Reserve was created, you want to read that book. That's amazing. So the Federal Reserve System, according to the Federal Reserve, there's the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Here's 12 reserve banks. Here's the Federal Open Market Committee. Here are their key functions: to conduct the nation's monetary policy, maintain stability of the financial system, supervising and regulating all this great stuff. Pretty interesting. Here are where the Federal Reserve banks are located. But according to G. Edward, here are the true objectives: to stop the erosion of power away from New York and eliminate these small banks that have all this gold that are printing their own money. We don't want that. We want to have control of it. So they wanted to reverse the trend of private capital formation. They wanted people to go to the bank and borrow money and then pay that money back plus interest, right? And then they want to also pass the inevitable bank losses over time onto taxpayers in the name of protecting the people, called a bailout. And here we are again, getting $2 trillion worth of bailouts. And we're actually getting paid with our own money that we got to pay back. And it's ridiculous. Go read that book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Essentially, the Federal Reserve Bank is a private bank that prints our money and loans it to us at interest. And it uses the IRS as its collection agency. Very interesting. Now, this right here is some tinfoil stuff right here. But I am a firm believer there's not a lot of coincidences out there. So there are these three really, really rich people who opposed the Federal Reserve, and they had nothing to do with banking. You had John Jacob Astor, you had Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidore Straus, he was the creator of Macy's. And there's this great article on the listlove.com, 10 reasons why the Titanic may have deliberately been sunk. And I'm going to let you go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just going to point out a couple of things. Here are the three most people who are most vocal against the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank, and they died on the Titanic. Now, what's interesting about that is that J.P. Morgan was the one who funded White Star, who created all those big boats. He was going to be on the boat. So was Milton Hershey. But at the very last minute, they canceled. They didn't get on. Astor, Guggenheim, and Strauss, they were all on the boat because they were going to talk to J.P. Morgan about the Federal Reserve Bank, try to create a win-win scenario. And they happened to die on April 15th, 1912, which April 15th is tax day. So maybe that's another great troll from the world, which is interesting. Also, anyway, I got a couple more slides here and I'll be finished up. But on 1933, there was an executive order that said, hey, gold bullion, gold coins, those are now illegal to own. You must turn them into the bank. It forbids the hoarding of gold coins, gold bullion. Gold is now illegal to use as coinage, to use as money. You must use our Federal Reserve notes. Bretton Woods is something that you might want to do some research on. In 1944, they gathered and they came to the conclusion, they created the World Bank, and they set the gold standard at $35 an ounce, where historically it had been $20 an ounce. Today, gold is $1,700 something an ounce. And it should be way, way higher than that because it's not really taking into considering a lot of this inflation stuff going on. And so basically, Bretton Woods pegged the gold ounce at $35 an ounce, and that basically stabilized these other currencies around the world. And then Nixon came along and said, nope, we are no longer pegging the dollar to gold at all. And I'm not a crook. I am, he's a crook. But look at the purchasing power of the dollar since the creation of the Federal Reserve. PAL, $1 in 1913. In 2013, that $1 was worth about 5 cents. Today, it's worth about a penny and a half. I don't even know how low it is now with all the trillions that they're printing. And they're just printing it and printing it and printing it and printing it. So dollar versus gold. If you look at this, the price of gold over time has increased 54 times since the dollar has lost all of its value. And actually, I think the value of gold has actually increased even more than that. So it's just amazing when you look at how inflation works. It's crazy. Digital money. There's about 75 trillion US dollars worldwide, including cash and deposits and money and all this stuff. Actual total cash, though, is about $5 trillion. Actual paper money that's been printed. So about 6.6% of all money, US dollars, is actual paper money. The rest is digital form. It's just digits on a screen. And so, here we are. Where are we now? We got digital money here. People are getting familiar with digital money, Venmo and Cash App and the WeChat and the Alipay. And here we are with crypto. And there we go. So recommended research for you guys is to go ahead and check out those books. These books have a lot of great information in it for you. And there's some rabbit holes for you to think about money. And there you go.